Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Buidl Crypto, where we bring together builders to talk about the opportunities and challenges of building products in crypto. I'm your host, Sanchan Saxena, VP of Product at Coinbase, and I'm super excited to host this last session of this monumental year called 2021. What a year it has been. If you've been around in crypto this year, you hopefully will agree with me that this year has been a turning point in crypto, or shall I say, Web3 instead. We saw cryptocurrencies hit all time highs. We saw institutions actually increase their participation in crypto from holding crypto on their balance sheets to actually participating in DeFi. And last but not the least, we saw new use cases emerge and take hold of in the mainstream mindset. For example, NFTs. So in today's session, we will have a chance to look back at 2021, and also chat about what's in the future for Web3 in 2022 and beyond. To do so, I'm joined by two eminent builders, Chris Dixon, who is a general partner at A16Z, and Naval Ravikant, who is an entrepreneur and an investor in Web3 as well. Welcome to both of you. But before we get started, I always have to say a few words of courtesy from my friends at Legal in Coinbase. Please note that today's conversation is for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal or investment advice. We may make forward-looking statements in the presentation, and actual results may vary materially from today's statements and are subject to risks and uncertainties. Phew, always a mouthful for me to speak, but I hope my friends in legal will appreciate me saying that. With that said, and without further ado, let's get started. So, Chris and Naval are both joining us. I think we're getting them up to the speaker level in Twitter Spaces. So I'll let them join in. I see both of them as listeners right now. Maybe I can continue the conversation, and as soon as they become speakers, we will introduce them. So, like I mentioned earlier, this year has been monumental. I think when I look back at January of 2021, I remember there were a lot of theses. There were a lot of hypotheses that, hey, institutions will come to crypto. Hey, NFTs will probably become a thing that mainstream will care for. And we've seen a lot since then. And what has happened is that we are seeing more and more mainstream adoption, but also newer use cases really getting a tailwind and getting to the mainstream as well. So I see Chris and Naval now both be speakers. So let's shift gears and welcome them. Welcome, Chris, and welcome, Naval.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Awesome. So one thing we do is like, look, I mean, the two of you don't need any introductions. Everybody knows the two of you. So what I thought we'll do instead is to make it real. We will ask you both a fun fact about yourselves that our audience could not have guessed by looking at your LinkedIn or Twitter feed. So just to give you some examples, when some other speakers were here, Gary was here one time, and he said he used to vet his bed at till the age of 10. So it could be as personal as that, or it could be anything fun. So we'll go with Chris and ask him to tell us a fun fact.
Oh man, what's a fun fact? I just kind of work all the time, so I don't have any fun facts. I like to cook. I cook a lot. I cook almost,
That's awesome.
almost every day, and I, to the extent I occasionally use non-Twitter social media, I post pictures of my cooking. So.
I love it. Anything special you love to cook, Chris?
I do a lot of like meat stuff, like steaks and porks and chicken and vegetables, like kind of simple stuff. But yeah, it's nice because most things I do in my life take like 5 years for anything to happen. So it's nice to have certain hobbies where you can have results right away. So.
Right, you can taste the fruit of your labor faster and quicker earlier. Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's definitely and indeed a fun fact. Naval, tell us about your fun fact.
Yeah, it's a hard question for me to answer, but that itself might be a fun fact, which is I don't like to think about myself, so I don't really have. I don't fixate on my past or my future. It's like it's a waste of time. So I've just kind of gotten in this mindset where like even thinking about the future is a form of hope, and it's kind of this belief that this moment isn't good enough. So it's just kind of a trap to keep you from actually just enjoying what's going on. So I don't believe in bios. I don't believe in future. So yeah, no fun fact. Sorry.
I love that.
Very, very serious guy.
At different level, it's like
quite the opposite, I would argue, right? Not serious about myself. Like every unhappy person is just thinking about themselves too much all the time.
That's true.
So true. Well, hopefully today we will indulge you, Naval, in at least looking back to the past and telling us how you feel about 2021, and hopefully towards the end make some predictions about the future. So to get started, we've talked about 2021 as being a pivotal year in many regards for Web3. I want to ask each one of you from your vantage point. You both have different vantage points. From your vantage point, when you look at 2021, what do you see? How much value you ascribe to this year, and what are some of the things you saw that really made you feel like, wow, Web3 is here? Let's start with Chris, maybe.
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, this was a really interesting year. So I guess, just kind of stepping back, I guess I'd say two things. Like one, I sort of like to think about it as both sort of what happens at the infrastructure layer and what happens at the application layer. And I think because the way I sort of view these major computing movements like Web3 is when they start to work, you start to kind of get a reinforcing feedback loop between infrastructure and applications. And so, I think to me, sort of the big story in 2020, of course, I think was DeFi, Uniswap, Compound, all the kind of DeFi summer stuff, which led to kind of a resurgence of building, sort of scaling infrastructure, L2s, Ethereum L2s, alternatives to, L1s like Solana. And then, of course, this year, I think kind of early in the year, the big breakout thing was NFTs, which, of course, had been around for many years, but I think really kind of broke out to a new, kind of a new higher level of awareness and a bigger audience. So that, so I think very much NFTs are a big part of the story. I think also now, we're at an exciting point on the infrastructure side where, you have real, you have obviously things like Polygon, which is debatably an L2 or a side chain, depending on your perspective, but then real L2s like Arbitrum, Optimism, and the ZKs that are coming soon. I think Solana has really emerged as a viable alternative now to Ethereum. You have other L1s, like Avalanche and other kind of emerging ones there. DeFi has continued to grow, and I think enable a lot of really interesting new use cases. Gaming, it started with things like Axie Infinity. I think will continue very strongly into next year, and that will again sort of be important both at the application level, but also to kind of cause more investment into infrastructure. So I just like a really kind of exciting year. I think, and you mentioned Web3. I think the whole kind of, just all of the stuff we've been working on, everyone in the space has I think emerged in sort of a broader awareness, including, this phrase Web3, which a lot of us have been using for years, but I think really kind of crystallized this year. And I think that in turn has caused a lot of people in the tech world who previously didn't see themselves joining this movement to join. And so that makes me very, very optimistic. I just think there's probably, my guess would be, and this is not scientific, there's something on the order of 10x, maybe more, high quality sort of founders, engineers, et cetera, working in the space today versus, let's say, a year ago. So just overall, I think it's just probably the best, most important year that I've been in the space for 8 years. So really exciting, and I'm excited for next year.
Yeah, that's a big testament. Naval, have you tell us your vantage point? What is your perspective?
No, I concur with everything Chris said. I would say that crypto is now a very large space. It is what I think of as the frontier of innovative technology. It's the most deregulated space, right? Historically, wherever is the least regulated and the newest is going to be the frontier. And maybe once upon a time that was the American West, and the gold rush, and then it was the tech business out of Silicon Valley, and now it's distributed crypto across the world. And so it resists summarization. So trying to say that this was the year of NFTs or the year of DeFi or the year of inflation-driven money printing and people looking for inflation hedges, or the year of developers entering the space for Web3, or the year of gaming in crypto, like all of those are true, or the year of new layer one blockchains. So it's a very complex space now. I think it resists summarization. I don't think you can just say anymore that you're a Web3 investor or a crypto investor. You even have to subspecialize in that. It's sort of becoming like saying, I invest in tech. Okay, well, what part of tech? Well, I invest in the internet. Well, okay, well, what part of the internet? So I think it's becoming just much more complex. It resists summarization. There's many, many simultaneous narratives happening. Yes, we're in a bubble. Yes, parts of it are legit because of the money printing, and Bitcoin is really coming into its own as a hedge against inflation, even in the developed countries. Yes, there's incredible cultural movement going on with NFTs. Yes, it's going to revolutionize gaming. Yes, it's going to, it's speculative in a casino. Yes, there's the largest shift of developers imaginable into here. Yes, it's the frontier. It's just very, very hard to predict how it'll play out and to summarize it. I think we're going to, the obvious things today, last year, the best thing to do was to be a degen farmer out there doing yield, collections on strange new protocols. This year it was probably getting in early into NFTs. And people think, yeah, maybe next year will be the year of social on crypto, or next year might be the year of gaming on crypto. And certainly people are making bets in that regard. But I think it's very hard to say what's going to happen. There's so much innovation going on here that the odds of a black swan emerging, or in this case, a white swan, a black swan that's beneficial, are overwhelming. So it's very hard to predict what's going to happen. And I think, if anything, watching how the last 2 years have played out with COVID should humble us, or make us a little more humble about making predictions of the future, or even summarizations of the past. It's kind of like asking, like, what was the biggest effect of COVID, right? I think there would be like 5 different legitimate answers. As an aside, the one I would choose is remote work, but there would be 5 different legitimate answers, not just one.
Yeah, I think that definitely resists summarization. Having said that, though, I will continue to push you both to summarize some aspects of it for the audience today, because it's important to get your perspective on some of these things. I think one of the things we talked about was Web3 in general, and there seem to be different definitions floating around. And I know we're not big fans of definitions per se, but the general concept is important for us to align on. So maybe Naval or Chris, you can tell the audience around how you view the universe of Web3 from your vantage point. What is Web3?
Well, I view Web3 as the world in which the code is open source instead of closed source. The users own their data instead of being the data. And the users and the contributors govern the network and own the network instead of a small number of shareholders owning the network. So I think those 3 characteristics unite to make it very, very unique. And then there's all kinds of offshoots from that, DAOs and digital scarcity and tokens and all that. But I think those are the three key underlying characteristics. You could also argue composability is a big deal, but that comes, I think, from the open source nature. But yeah, to me, Web3, and I think Packy and Chris have gone a lot into this. It's, you know, the users and the contributors own the tokens and control the network. The code is all open source, so anybody can get to it. These stateful open source databases live online, and users access them with their private keys and own their data instead of being exploited, and they have a piece of the future. It's true. These are community owned marketplaces that are running these new protocols, these new networks, and these new applications, which is a mind-bogglingly new concept. So new that the powers that be, you know, the regulators and the existing old world of investors doesn't know how to grok it. So their first instinct is like, this must be bad. By the way, I would argue that one of the other things that really happened in 2021 that was not so good is that the so-called final boss, you know, I call them the final boss, the governments of the world who don't like crypto really took notice and really stood up to the point where China this time around really did make a serious effort at banning crypto. You know, India's talking about banning privacy coins and unhosted wallets, what they call unhosted wallets, but like the real wallets. And even the US is, you know, in a very hostile regulatory environment. So all of these good things, good in quotes, that happened in the last year are also accelerating the confrontation with the final boss, which doesn't have to be a confrontation. I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what crypto is and how free societies can benefit from it. But that's a very difficult argument to make. It's very nuanced, and it doesn't fit into any existing buckets. It's not like you can just say, oh yeah, it's like we took PayPal and we made it like lower fees, right? It resists analogy. It not only does crypto resist summarization, it resists analogy. It's too new. It's like trying to analogize the internet to the telegraph or the TV. You would miss more than you would actually capture.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. Sometimes all humans have the tendency to look at the future from the lens of the past, and you miss what the future is for its own value.
Yeah,
Chris?
and like there are these popular threads that'll say, well, give me a Web3 app. We'll say, well, okay, you know, how about lending? Well, no, that's not an app that we would use. That's a bullshit app. Give me another app. Okay, well, you know, how about like, NFTs and digital art? Well, no, that's not a real app. Give me another app that I use. Okay, well, users own their data in their games, and it's portable, and they have their identities. No, I don't like that app. Give me another app. Okay, well, DNS, that's like, you know, resistant to censorship and seizure, and social networks that are just no, that's not a real app. Give me another app, right? So people keep demanding these apps, but they demand apps that look like their previous apps. I mean, heck, look, censorship resistant, censorship resistant money, and a Wall Street that doesn't need a bunch of bankers to run and suck up 20% of the economy in the process is a real app. That's, you know, the entire financial system is being replaced. That's a huge app, but they refuse to acknowledge that as an app. So there are people who just don't want to see it because it looks too different, and they have their heads in the sand. And in that sense, it's an ideological struggle. We'll see if the future of the world is going to be governed by the internet, or if it's going to be governed by pen and paper and lawyers.
Yeah. I think, Chris, you were saying something?
No, I was just listening. I probably agree with Naval. Are going to agree a lot today, but I would just add another way to explain Web3 is through the kind of historical lens. The way I kind of think of the history of the internet, you had the prehistory, you know, in the academic era before the 1990s, but the kind of modern internet, the commercial internet, really kind of began around 1990, and you had the first kind of what we think of as Web 1 from 1990 to, let's say, roughly 2005, where, you know, kind of the key thing was that the internet was governed by open protocols. So HTTP, SMTP, the protocols that govern, you know, the web and email respectively. And what that meant is that, you know, when Larry and Sergey built Google, for example, they knew they were building on an open protocol. So if they built, you know, a popular search engine, they could keep the money and the control. And that led to a massive wave of innovation that we had in the 90s and the early 2000s. But the problem with that era was, you know, there were great, obviously really important applications like Google and Amazon, but they were also mostly kind of read-only for the most part. If you look at the 90s web, it was sort of people putting brochures and catalogs on the internet. And then the next wave people call Web 2, you know, really the functionality got a lot more advanced, and you moved to a much more kind of programmable web, read-write web. That actually used to be the name of a popular blog, you know, in that era, and people called it Web 2. And it was really kind of exploring the programmability of web pages. And the fact that you could have, you know, really rich apps that we have today. You think of something like Figma. I mean, you know, it's just amazing application. That would have been kind of unthinkable in the first year of the web. So Web 2 was amazing in that you got these really awesome apps, but you did it at the price of centralization. So, we're on Twitter right now, and this is basically an essential, I would say, public service of kind of the main the water cooler of the internet, and it's owned by a private company, and it's governed by some opaque group of product managers who decide who gets access to the platform, what the rules are around the algorithm, what the take rates are to the extent there's money paid out to creators. All those kinds of questions we've put in the hands of a few companies. And so the third era of the web, I think of Web3 as combining the best of the first two eras. So in Web3, the services are governed by blockchains. And blockchains, one of the neat features of a blockchain is you can make strong commitments about the behavior in the future. So if you built something like Twitter on a blockchain, you could say, here are the rules. They're governed by the community who owns tokens. We have a certain governance system. We have rules for who gets access. We have rules for how the economics work, and it's baked into the system, and you can trust it because it's open source code you can audit, and the blockchain consensus mechanism guarantees that the code will be enforced immutably in perpetuity, right? And so I think of Web3 as combining the best features of Web 1 and Web 2. And that's Web 1 in that you get this kind of credible neutrality, that you get open platforms upon which developers, creators, other people can build and know that what the rules are, both economically, creatively, et cetera, while also enjoying the advanced functionality that we had in Web 2 and sort of programmability and everything else. So, if it works, as I think it's trending to, but it's still early, it will be sort of the best of both worlds. Another, to Naval's point, I think another way to think of it is we're building internet services now, everything from financial services like, Bitcoin or DeFi applications to social services to cultural services like NFTs. We're building services that are now owned and operated by communities instead of owned and operated by companies, right? And so this is sort of this idea that, as Naval was alluding to, that our friend Packy McCormick came up with, and I use now in sort of blog posts and tweet storms and things, which is this another definition we use of Web3, which is an internet owned by users and builders, orchestrated with tokens. So tokens are kind of the key concept, and tokens can be fungible or non-fungible NFTs. Anyway, so I can go on and on, but maybe I'll pause there.
Yeah, maybe I was just riffing on what Chris said. I would summarize it as community-owned web, or sorry, contributor-owned web. So you could say user-owned, but it's not quite. It's not users. It's contributors to the blockchain in proportion to what the blockchain values. And it's not quite community-owned because community is a fuzzy word. So it's contributor-owned web. And that's what we're moving to. And if you go back to good old Unix, which I know Chris remembers, it seems like every little Unix command line thing that you could do turned into a major company. So grep became Google, and Finger became Twitter, and NetTrack became all the games and so on, and NetNews, Usenet became like Reddit. And there was this great command in Unix, for those of you who are geeks, like chmod, where you would kind of set the user privileges and how much power you had. And there was read, and there was write, and there was execute. And we've gone from the read-only web to the writable web to the executable web and the ownable web. And it's going to be owned by the contributors. So I think it's actually a fantastic outcome. It's great to see the web evolve away from a small set of monopolies and duopolies into something that is going to be dynamically owned by the contributors. And I think it's also part of the rise of NFTs is along that line, because before NFTs came along, 2008, you had Bitcoin created, which was this massive, incredible breakthrough invention that underlies all of crypto today. But it did have this flaw where it was like, well, just the people who were around when Bitcoin was there early and got to adopt it early cheaply are the big winners. And then people said, well, okay, a decentralized ledger makes sense, but why that one? Why is that one the one? So people started creating more and more of them. So now there's thousands of them. And then people came along and said, well, okay, why that particular coin? Why not this coin or this meme? And it turns out that everything digital can be made scarce. Everything digital can be made valuable if the community agrees that it has value. And it now turns crypto and the Web3 ecosystem into a dynamic process where new people are always coming up. New contributors can always come in, create new value, and capture a piece of that value. And it's not a static ossified system. And every system prior to this one was a static system. And I think with Web3, you now have a truly dynamic system. everything is always up for grabs. If Uniswap fails to do something right, SushiSwap is waiting in the wings. If a token community does something wrong, then it forks and there's an exit. The old protocols, as long as it has believers, they don't die. If someone comes up with a better new NFT or a better approach to NFTs, then they can sort of start the whole thing afresh and do a drop. So it's a web that allows communities, and it does have some network effects, but it doesn't really allow for long-term lock-in and exploitation of the users, because a new set of contributors can always go off and start a new thing, and then because the data lives openly in these stateful open databases, a lot of it is portable. Users carry their identities, users are portable, communities are portable, networks are portable. This is a much freer web than we've encountered in the last decade. So I think it takes a while for people to wrap their heads around. The people who say Instagram already does this, or Facebook is already good enough, they're used to living in a form of serfdom. They're used to living in a form of digital slavery. Not to use that word lightly, but it's a serfdom where it's like my work is owned by the landlord. Zuck owns my work and can take away my user handle or take away my data or delete me anytime he wants. That's not a good world that we want to be trapped in. But it's a little hard for people to kind of imagine a world in which they're no longer serfs on, it used to be Jack's farm, and that's the new Twitter CEO, Parag, I think, or Zuck's farm or whoever, right?
Yeah, and I think the key to all of this is the user empowerment that we're talking about. I think Chris, you had mentioned before as well. It's orchestrated through tokens. So tell us about like how this token idea manifests and why is it so powerful to drive this community involvement? Why?
Yeah, well, I think so. I mean, the way I think about it is a token is sort of a very simple kind of unit of both sort of economic and governance rights, and maybe other rights can be, it's software, so you can imagine other things kind of being added later on. But I think where we've kind of converged in the community right now is you have these kind of two aspects. So, and that they can obviously be, so I was mentioning before, they can be NFTs where there's an associated, where they're just by definition not fungible, so they're unique, and there can be associated metadata and also code. I think one thing we're only just beginning to explore is the idea that NFTs could be sort of fully programmable in the same way that going back to the analogy of the web, I think we're in kind of the Web 1 era of NFTs where mostly they're just kind of static metadata like a JPEG or a song. But I think very soon we're going to see things that have function calls and where you compose, you take one NFT and add it to another and then get kind of, a new functionality from that. And so NFTs in some ways are sort of they're sort of digital objects, another way to think of it. You look around the real world and most of the world are non-fungible items, your pack of gum or your video game or whatever it might be. And then you have fungible tokens, which is going back to the beginning is Bitcoin. And then you have, things like Ether for Ethereum, which is very important because it's the token that powers the system. And you use Ether to basically buy time on the supercomputer. And so that's become it's an important part of the security model of layer one blockchains is to have the token, and you can actually reason quite formally about like how much it would take to attack those costs to attack those systems. And then you have fungible tokens, used in DeFi protocols, which are used primarily for governance. So for example, if you Google Uniswap governance or compound governance, you'll see these very active forums where people are discussing these topics and then voting using their tokens to decide on how to change and upgrade the protocols, right? And then you have, NFTs used in different contexts. Like I wrote a tweet thread the other day about 7 different types of NFTs because I think a lot of people think there's just only a few types. But you can use them for sort of access to a private Discord. You can use them to represent a piece of music, a piece of, like a piece of art. They can be video game objects. I think probably next year, the big theme in NFTs will be video games, just based on what we've seen in terms of entrepreneurs working in that space. There's just a whole bunch of people doing that now, like really talented game designers. One thing I'm really excited about is the possibility of using things like NFTs for creators to monetize. I think if you look at most social networks today, the take rates for creative people are very, very low. So on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, the take rate 0, meaning they pay out $0 that they make on a creator out to the creators. On YouTube, it's 50%. On iOS and Android, they take 30%. Those are very, very high take rates. I don't think they're sustainably high. I think they're unsustainably high take rates. There's almost no markets in the world where you can have an intermediary take that much and survive. I think one of the really exciting things going on now is you're going to see, for example, musicians use NFTs in the same way they use offline merchandise. A lot of them make a lot, at least pre-COVID, made a lot of money, selling merchandise as they tour and things. I think you're going to see a similar kind of thing happen online. And one of the nice properties of that is that the intermediaries in the case of NFTs take very little money because they can't take more money because they don't control the network, and the switching costs are very low. So the take rate on OpenSea, for example, is 2.5%, which means the musician keeps 97.5%. And if you sort of do the economics, it's similar to what happens on Substack, which of course is not a crypto, not a Web3 product. But when you have creative people who are able to directly connect with their fans and monetize without an intermediary, the economics are dramatically better. So I think what you're going to see in the next couple of years is you're going to see not what we're used to in Web 2, which is kind of a demand-led disruption. Meaning you go and, like, the Web 2 model was you go and you get a whole bunch, you get millions of users and you aggregate them and then you layer on a business model. I think the Web 3 model is going to be you get the creators first, because the monetization they get today is so bad. And they're going to come for the monetization, and then the users will come and follow the creators because they're the ones who they're not really going. People are not going to YouTube to enjoy YouTube. They're going to see the creators. Anyway, so the tokens, like tokens, they're like web pages. Like, they're very simple concepts. It's a very simple concept. It's a unit of ownership and control, but they're software and they're programmable. And so that's why, like, I'm talking about, on the one hand, musicians, the other hand, DeFi protocols, because they're incredibly malleable concept. And I think they're sort of at the core of the whole Web3 movement.
Yeah, in many regards, that token allows community ownership of IP or the intellectual property or the art, right? So that really drives that involvement and engagement with the community. And you, as you mentioned in your tweet, Strom, you don't have to then spend insane amount of money marketing on your balance sheet and just have those evangelists be part of the community that driving that.
That's right. Nobody in Web3 spends money on marketing, and it's just because the way I think about it is you have to spend money on marketing. When you have products people don't love, and when they don't feel a sense of ownership, and so you have to bombard them with Facebook ads and things. If you look sorry, go ahead.
I would be hesitant to use the term IP in the context of blockchains, because if you remember way back when the first software businesses came out, people said, how can you make money in software? There's nothing tangible. There's no hardware. And then in software, they said, okay, well, we have IP. That's how you make money. And then when the internet came along, it's like, well, the software is going open source, and like, how are you going to make money? There's not even any software you're shipping. And then it turns out, well, the value is in the website and the users. And now blockchains are saying, well, even the website is up for grabs. So really all the value actually ends up being in the community. It's a very, very pure play thing where, like, only the community remains. That's why I think the last generation has a hard time wrapping their head around it.
But just to add to Naval's point, that's the most common source of confusion I see around NFTs. People think it has to do with copyright. Copyright's orthogonal. You can have an NFT and then you separately decide on the copyright, and it can be public domain, it can be fully copyrighted. It's a separate question. It's just completely orthogonal to to whether what you do on a blockchain. Sorry.
The value in the blockchains in the community. I mean, to answer your question, Sanchan, and I know that that IP doesn't really exist in blockchain, right, and not the same way, but I just don't want people to get confused and start thinking, well, intellectual property, well, who defends intellectual property? If it's not on chain, it's very hard for blockchains to adjudicate them, reason about them, and to allocate resources around them. But just backing up for a second, why tokens, right? The simple question is why tokens? Because I think a lot of regulators and a lot of people looking at this space skeptically would be like, well, why do you need a token? That just smells like a casino. Well, what you're doing underneath is you're replacing individual corporations and dictators and owners with markets, and markets need money. You cannot have markets without money, because markets only signal through supply and demand and pricing. So they need money. And in this case, the blockchain needs to have control over the money that it is dealing in, because it needs to be able to hand out that money to people who are contributing, and it needs to be able to take that money away or slash or punish people who are doing bad things to the network, because every network has cheaters. So fundamentally, you cannot have a blockchain without tokens. I think this meme was alive in the early days of crypto, which is, I'm into blockchains, but not into Bitcoin. That's nonsense. You can't be
Blockchain, not
into
Bitcoin. Yeah.
yeah, you can't be into a blockchain without its underlying token, because then it's a marketplace that has no money, and it's not a market anymore. Then it's just a mob. Then it's just done by headcount or by force or by randomness. It's not done in a logical way. So you need the money, the tokens, to reward the contributors and to punish the cheaters. And as Chris implied, these tokens are incredibly malleable and programmable. It's more than just money. They're not just fungible. As Chris pointed out, most of the world does not consist of fungible items. Most of the world consists of non-fungible items. In fact, even in multiverse theory, which is one of the leading theories in physics as to kind of how the universe is constructed, there's fungible particles and there's non-fungible particles. The non-fungible, that is instantiated into the multiverse, outnumbers the fungible ones drastically. So for whatever reason, nature prefers non-fungibility. That's reality. Reality is non-fungible. Fungible is mostly a construct. And so we just kind of have to realize that most of this market is going to head into tokens that then become malleable into being non-fungible tokens. And the different ways in which you can create, transact, store, and program value is going to be nearly infinite. I would say, in a way, Chris is absolutely right. NFTs are going to be unrecognizable 3 or 4 years from now from where they are today. And they're going to be viewed as fundamental a piece of the internet as anything else.
Yeah, so actually, let's dive into NFTs, because we all recognize that NFTs are not inherently just about the art. It could be, the concept could be applied to many, many different NFTs or things that can be non-fungible. So I know, Chris, you tweeted about it as well. Why don't you talk a little bit about the different types of NFTs you see emerging and why that matters?
Sure. Yeah. So, well, I mentioned some of these before. I think there's, the thing I think most people think about is, when they hear NFTs right now, is art and kind of collectibles like CryptoPunks and Bored Apes, and that's definitely a big thing now. I think there's different motivations for that. I think it's worth kind of slicing it up a little bit. I think if you talk to people that the PFPs, the profile pictures, the Bored Apes, CryptoPunks, that's sort of a combination. Like, why do people buy those? Some of it, part of it is community. Like those people, those groups kind of associate with one another. They have sort of different kind of brands and ethos. Part of it is is financial. They think that the community is going to grow and they'll go up. Part of it is kind of status, in the same way that, why does somebody have fashion or fancy car or something else? It's sort of a way to indicate that they're that they're either early or wealthy or whatever it might be. There's different kind of motivations. There's another kind of another area of visual NFTs that are more one-of-one art kind of things, which you see on websites like Super Rare and Foundation. And there, I think it's more my experience having bought a bunch of these. It's kind of more a combination of social patronage and maybe aesthetic and collecting. It's sort of that's actually one of the really interesting things, I think, with the collectible NFTs. It's just a sort of like many different motivations. You talk to different people, and there's like sort of different degrees to which each motivation is important to them. And then, as I mentioned before, there's sort of music ones. We've made a few investments there and some interesting stuff where musicians are sort of using NFTs to engage their fans, and the fans can kind of show that they're early and that they're a top fan, and collect kind of associated music and art and things like that. There's game objects, as I mentioned, where that's sort of the big breakout this year. First was Top Shot, and then Axie, and I think, again, you're going to see a lot more next year. I think one of the really cool things with the game objects is this concept of composability, where you can loot is probably the most talked about example here, where this was this really cool project where by Dom Hoffman, where the initial NFTs were this kind of inventory of what a Dungeons and Dragons character would have, and then other people came and built characters on top and graphics and stories. It's sort of like, imagine if a group of people got together and wrote a novel, and the first person wrote the first chapter and the next person wrote the second chapter, or something like that. And it's just sort of these Lego bricks where you can recombine them in interesting ways. And so I think we're going to see a lot of experiments with that. If I had to guess, that would be a big theme for next year. NFTs would be kind of game-like experiences and people kind of coming up with new ways to compose those NFTs. And then there's also there's redeemables, I call them, which are NFTs that can be redeemed for physical objects. There's access-based NFTs where you can go, either online, like behind-the-scenes Discord, private video, cooking lessons, whatever it might be, offline experiences, and then by the way, you can combine all these different things. So that's, if you look at like, Gary Vaynerchuk, like he's got these art combined with access, combined with this. So I think it's just I think that one reason people are excited is it feels like a very rich canvas, a very, very rich design space, and it's just beginning. And I think that has gotten a lot of builders and kind of designers and other people really excited, because they're kind of, I think some of them are sort of tired of the last design space, or the Web2 design space, and they realize this is a whole new area to explore.
Yeah, definitely lots of big canvas.
So this is a good question. What the heck is an NFT? I think a lot of people are struggling with this. I've struggled with it. I struggled with it in Tweetstorm that I now have some regrets about because I think I just overcomplicated it. I would say an NFT now, look at how it's defined. It says non-fungible token. So it's defined as a negative of something else. What is that something else? A fungible token. What does fungible mean? Fungible means interchangeable, right? So it's a non-interchangeable token. It's a unique token. Okay, how is that uniqueness enforced? Well, it can be enforced by some offline entity. Gary Vaynerchuk saying this is going to be a ticket for admission to my event. It can be enforced by the blockchain itself saying ENS domains are unique. We will not resolve, the browsers won't resolve to another domain. So blockchains and software enforce it. Or when people say, well, I can just right click and save that Bored Ape or CryptoPunk, like that's not unique. Well, it's a Schelling point for a community around it. So it's a programmable object that can be bought and sold that has enforced scarcity either by a blockchain or by an offline entity or by an online community. In a sense, the whole Uniswap smart contract is an NFT. Now I can right click, save, copy Uniswap and republish it on my site, but it's got no community. No one's coming to it. So it's a buyable, sellable, programmable thing that lives on a blockchain, which has some enforced scarcity. And the scarcity can come from some offline enforcement. It can come from in-code enforcement, or it can come from social enforcement. And that last one is the one that throws people for a loop because they have no concept of social enforcement. They say, well, wait a minute, my Bored Ape copy is just as good as your original Bored Ape. Why is yours any better? And it's because there's a group of people who matter, and there's a pile of software that matters that is going to enforce the authenticity of the original one. If I walk into a metaverse room and one has real, quote unquote, art on the walls, which are enforced by NFT scarcity and authenticity, and the one has fake art on the walls, where do you think the rich kids and the cool kids are going to want to hang out? They don't want to hang around fake art. They want to hang around real art. They want to hang around provenance. They want to hang around the creator. So I think NFTs are just, it's defined negatively. There's a lot more NFTs than there are FTs. So you kind of have to throw this idea out of your mind that NFTs are the new weird thing and that FTs are the normal thing. No. FTs are the weird thing that barely exists in the real universe and barely exists in reality. NFTs are the normal thing. And what we've figured out is a way to bring NFTs in the blockchain and to enforce their scarcity through one of these three mechanisms, either offline enforcement by a human, or online enforcement by a blockchain or by code, or by online enforcement through a community that gathers around that NFT.
Yeah, I mean that's such a good point, which is you can't right click and save the community. That's the main thing around that.
That's exactly right.
Right. So, Kristen, now I mean I think the exciting part is that all of this is very, very exciting for the people on this call, but also in the community. But oftentimes you get this ding. When I talk with regulators or when I talk with the non-crypto people, if I can use that word, is like, it's still very complex. All of this is very complex. I don't get it. So what do you say to those folks who are finding this to be very overwhelmingly complex?
Yeah, I mean, I think partly that's the fault of people like me and the community of just not explaining it well enough. And I think we're trying, like we at our firm are trying, and I think others, Coinbase and Naval and a bunch of other people are, and I think we need to get better at explaining what this is. I think ultimately it'll come in the form of products. Like I think that the big change will happen when people end up using kind of Web3 products on a daily basis, right? So I think really the audience right now that like I'm probably speaking to and they're all speaking to are more kind of technologists, designers, people building things. I think that we're in that stage of the concentric circle. I think like a year ago we were in the stage of kind of the cult, right? Frankly, which I consider myself part of. And if you look at the numbers, like it was about 1 million people, roughly using some of these popular wallets. Today, it's like 25 million or something like that. It's grown on the order of 25x over this course of this year, the size of the kind of user base. And I think more importantly, of those 25 million, many are people that build stuff, right? And a lot of those people are building right now. And I can say that from my day job. Like we just see, we've got 12 people on our investment team, and we're overwhelmed with interesting, entrepreneurs coming in. So it's really
a lot
really
of them are
happening.
joining
Yeah.
A16Z, Chris. Remember? Like
that's a meme. Yeah. It reminds me. I don't know. Like you never know where you are. My experience in tech is you never really know where you are until like 5 years later. So I'm guessing when I say this, but I think I remember 2009 through 11. If you look back at it, 2009 through 11 was the golden period of mobile. 2007, the iPhone came out. 2008, the App Store. The original first year of apps, it was like flashlight apps and like silly games. And then you had, Uber, Venmo, Snapchat, Instagram, like all the things that like drove it forward came all basically 2009 through 12. And it's interesting, Facebook did the mobile pivot in 2012. Even Facebook, a company that sophisticated, didn't fully, in 2009 through 11, it was still a kind of, iPhones were still rich people's smartphones. Like it wasn't obvious. It was obvious they were important, but it wasn't obvious that it was the primary form of computing, and even more important than desktops, right? 2012 was, I think, when the tech world realized that. I'm just using Facebook as an example, but like that's when they did their famous mobile pivot away from the HTML5 kind of secondary app. And so you didn't really know until then. And then, of course, fast forward and, mobile ate the world, all of that. I think, so I think an interesting question is, where are we now? I think we're maybe in that hockey stick moment now with Web3. I'm not sure. Just in the sense of like this whole huge second wave of entrepreneurs and builders have now entered. Now that's going to take some time to work its way through the system. They have to go build products and launch the products and market them and everything else. But to your question, I think that's ultimately when the world changes and people realize, their kids are using these products, their friends are using these products, they see the value, they understand why all these kind of abstract concepts that we're talking about today, how it actually affects their lives. So I think that's ultimately how we kind of get that message across. I think there's only so much you can do talking, I would probably say.
Right. Great products will bring on people.
I think that's right. We just have to build. To me, Web3 is inevitable. It's just a question of when and where. Sadly, I think today with the heavy regulations, you're seeing a lot of U.S. investors and U.S. participants being banned from Web3 apps. And I think a lot of the developers are either choosing to stay at home in their foreign countries or fleeing overseas. So it'll happen. It's not stoppable any more than the internet is. It's just a question of when and where. And I think that any regulator or any politician who sort of stands in the way of tens of millions of creators from getting paid is essentially going to be in the garbage bin of history, the dustbin of history, because creators and influencers, by definition, set the culture. And a lot of politics is downstream of culture and technology. And if you resist technology and you resist culture, and you prevent the cultural people from making money, and by being free to earn from what they're building, you're not going to be popular as a regulator or as a politician. Your days are numbered. You've lost the youth vote. You've lost the middle-aged vote. So I think over time this is inevitable. I just hope that it does happen in the U.S. to some degree. And I think the race is to build mass market applications that the creators and their fans adopt over the next year or two. Before heavy-handed regulations from the 1930s, there were securities laws that were written for something completely different, are applied to the sector and just completely snuff out the innovation. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people just don't understand it, and it has been my unfortunate experience throughout life that generally for completely new paradigms, and I don't use the word lightly, but I think it applies here. This is one of the rare cases where it really does apply. For new paradigms, the old guard literally has to die out or be thrown out of power before the new thing can come into its own. And I've seen this with, we see this all the time in technology, of course. I saw it myself with AngelList. Like, we couldn't use the existing GPs on the platform. We couldn't get the existing LPs on the platform. We had to create our own new GPs and our own new LPs. Twitter and YouTube didn't win by bringing in movie stars and journalists. They had to create their own native creators who really live and die based on the platform. And so the same way, I think that in crypto and tokens and adoption and Web3, it's going to be a whole new breed of creators. It's going to be a whole new breed of programmers. It's going to be a whole new breed of artists. And it may even be new countries and new regulators and new politicians who sort of lift the crypto banner, realize that this is the future and say, well, you know, the United States, for example, the West was a huge beneficiary of the open internet. And there are countries out there that will decide to be huge beneficiaries of open Web3, which is far more open than the base internet or Web2 ever were. One last point I'll make is I think that today, a lot of crypto and Web3 is not truly decentralized. There's a lot of decentralized in name only going on, and the teams are identifiable. The work they're doing is like local. They're operating at the center. These networks can't run without them. So they're like mostly decentralized or partially decentralized, but not completely. And so I think right now there's still targets to go after. But the more regulators go after these targets, the faster it sort of evolves into becoming completely secure and anonymous and distributed. Like a true DAO to me is not something where you can point out who the people are and and it's interacting with offline or regulated assets. A true DAO is one morning you wake up as a regulator 20 years from now, and it's all CryptoPunks and Bored Apes and what's not running the thing. You literally don't know what country any of them live in. You don't know who any of them are. You can't even really tell what they're doing because it's all happening in encrypted smart contracts, and they're only getting paid in crypto and never cashing out to fiat. And they're doing things that are entirely in the metaverse or the ideaverse. Where does that company even exist? Where does it live? Who does it belong to? Right? That's a true DAO. And I think true DAOs, we're still kind of working our way towards those, but the more heavy-handed regulation you see, the faster we are going to get there. One of the things that we haven't really talked as much about on this conversation so far is, you know, if you want to look 1 year out, okay, games are coming to blockchains and that's going to be cool. But you want to look 3 years out, zero knowledge proofs are going to be everywhere, and they're going to be at the core of how these blockchains and DAOs and identities and networks operate. And zero knowledge proofs are a closed system. They're a completely closed box. And when they become to the core of crypto protocols and they become normalized, I think you're going to see a level of decentralization that we're still scratching the surface on. It's going to be true decentralized Web3.
Yeah, you packed a lot of wisdom in there. So I want to come back to two things. One is regulation and how that is affecting innovation. The other one was around prediction 2 or 3 years out. So I want to come back to that. One thing both of you mentioned is like, I think, Naval, you mentioned it more in a more spicy way, which is the old guard has to die out for the new to survive, right? So I want to take both of your perspectives. Is when Web 1 to Web 2 transition happened, which companies survived? When Web 2 to Web 3 transition happened, do you think the current guard of companies that are actually very strong in those domains can actually really transition into this new world, or not? What's your take on that?
They can't transition. I mean, it was Fermi or Planck, I forget which physicist, said that science advances one funeral at a time, and he was talking about physicists who are like the most truth-seeking, logical people on the planet.
Right.
So when you're talking about like an existing company, it's a classic innovator's dilemma. They have hundreds of billions or trillions of market cap to protect. They have an entire huge user base and developer base that doesn't understand Web3. The incentives are all wrong. All their good people have already left or are leaving to do their own crypto thing. It's funny, back in a couple of years ago when I would talk to people about crypto and they were at a big venture firm, if they were smart, I would say, you're getting into crypto. My prediction is within 2 years, you'll have left this firm because the firm around you doesn't understand it. And that's fine. It has no reason to understand it. They were making a fine living, a very good living, not understanding crypto, the same way Facebook and Google and Apple and so on are making a very fine living, not understanding crypto. And I've been at the highest levels of those companies pitching their top executives, and they smile and nod and they take notes and it's another meeting and then they move on. They're just simply not geared for it. And also, it takes a very small number of people to make a huge difference in crypto land because it's a small number of developers at the core, but then they enlist this massive community. The thing goes viral. It doesn't necessarily even need venture capitalists. It doesn't need armies of developers. It doesn't need armies of marketers, and it doesn't need lots of advertisements. These things are incredibly organic. Look at what Twitter is. Twitter is amazing at assembling flash mobs around individuals. Twitter Spaces is amazing in assembling large assemblies of listeners around small groups of individuals. And the same way crypto communities are incredibly good at assembling huge groups of contributors and traders and buyers and investors and users. around a small number of developers, many of whom are just working with open source and composable software. So they truly are standing on the shoulders of giants. It's the nature of Web3 development that every problem just has to be solved once. Once the problem is solved once in a really good way, you can fork it. Maybe you have to port it at most. But you use open source and composability to just build on the shoulders of giants over and over and over and over again. And the world has never seen anything like the composability that's possible in Web3. So this space is going to advance through leaps and bounds in ways that I think people's mental models can't even keep up with it. I pay a lot of attention to it. I still have a very hard time understanding what's going on, not because it's inherently wrong or bad or fake. It's just that there's just a lot going on. It moves much, much faster as a frontier than any other space that I've ever paid attention to. So yeah, society's going to have to be left behind and catch up a little bit. The odds of the Web 2 guys pivoting in and having a shot at Web 3, near zilch. I mean, it's only possible if there's a founder at the helm and they bet the company on it, right? Like Bill Gates did with Microsoft and he got somewhere, or Steve Jobs had to famously come back to Apple, or Zuck has done, a couple of times now at Instagram and WhatsApp, and now he's doing with VR and Meta and so on. By the way, I think he's wrong on that one. I don't think he'll succeed. I'll go out on a limb. But I don't think he'll succeed in pivoting to a metaverse Web3 company, just because I don't think the metaverse ends up being owned by any single company. That said, I mean, he may be successful in the sense that he may get to participate in the metaverse that emerges, because like Bill Gates betting Microsoft, they got to participate much more in the internet revolution than they would have otherwise, but they didn't get to own the internet. So the same way, I don't think Facebook gets to own the metaverse, so to speak. And I like the definition of metaverse that I think Sean Puri and others were throwing around, which is it's not 3D, it's just more of your life is digital than physical, and more of your value is extracted digitally than physically, and more of your time is spent digital than physical. So in that view of the world, I think Facebook can be a participant, but they're not going to be the owner. And I think if the company is not founder run, they don't have a chance.
Yeah, I think on that note, I mean, Chris, you invest in these founders. You have invested a lot in Web2 companies. So what do you think?
I'm not an investor in Web2 companies, but yeah,
do you think they'll survive and transition to Web3?
No, look, I mean, look, Microsoft basically missed the internet, smartphones, social networking, and they're doing fine. So, I mean, the tech world is huge, right? And people still use Excel and Word, and Hewlett Packard's still around, and IBM's still around. So I don't think like these companies are going anywhere. And they'll probably, there'll be search engines and things like that, 20 years from now, and maybe it's Google, probably is. But I don't think that they are going to. I mean, I agree with Naval in that there's a very low chance that they'll be the winners in kind of the Web3 world. I mean, for one, it's just fundamentally kind of a misaligned model with how they think. I mean, the whole point in my mind, of Web3 is that you're allowing the community to own the network. You'd have to, just kind of completely undo the entire kind of cap tables of these companies. And so it's just not going to happen. It's also a cultural thing. I think a striking thing I see, to Naval's point, is this kind of the spread between the attitudes of senior people at these companies and the junior people. So the senior people, if you go on Twitter and things, they're like making fun of people like Naval. It's a joke. What's the point of a blockchain? It's a slow database. The junior people are all applying to jobs with us, right? And like leaving in droves. And I think that is going to just continue to accelerate. And I would, I think the easiest bet to make is like betting on people earlier in their career who were technical, who want to work on the frontier. So I guess I generally agree with Naval. I would just say though that, I think the tech world probably will just continue, software eats the world, and the internet will get more and more important in our lives. But the new kind of much bigger concentric circle will be the Web3 movement, which will be kind of a new set of services which are owned by communities, not companies.
Yeah, I think the history will be written in the future, so to say. We'll see how these things pan out. One topic we have touched upon, and I think we should go deeper into, is around regulation and how different and foreign policy regulation and US regulation, how it's going to affect the innovation around it. And I know recently Balaji and others wrote an article on foreignpolicy.com where we talked about the world of tomorrow will be ruled by technopolitics rather than geopolitics. And I know, Naval, you retweeted that as well. I'd love to hear, like, Do you agree with that point of view? What's your point of view? And is technopolitics the right way to think about the future?
Yeah, Balaji had a very provocative article in Foreign Policy magazine. I suggest everybody read it. It's really well written. But he basically argues that it's not about like, nation states versus international institutions versus whatever. The real emerging thing that you got to pay attention to is not U.S. versus China. It's sort of these non-national internet-based movements like the network state, which he talks about, or about internet protocols. I think the title of his piece was "Great Protocol Politics," which is a great title, but it kind of gets the point across that uh, protocols have governance systems inside them. They have large communities embedded. They can amass millions and eventually billions of people. And these people are going to have a say, and they're going to have a different way of doing things, and they'll vote with their money, they'll vote with their feet. So this is kind of a massive emergent force that you have to take into account. Like if you go onto Twitter, and you see Bitcoiners, Bitcoiners are united around Bitcoin, and they're as much united around Bitcoin as Christians are around Christianity, and Americans are around America, and blue states are around being blue, Democrats and Republicans are around being Republicans. Like this is an ideology and a movement that is just as strong, if not stronger, and it's backed up with money, and it's backed up with belief, and it's backed up with encryption. So I think that this is just something you have to pay attention to. So kind of this purely physical model of like, treating everything as like it's geographically limited is obsolete. Now, we are stuck in an old regulatory model, right? So regulators regulate money, and we've gotten addicted to this idea of that we can sanction people, we can control the flow of money, we can delete people's accounts that have money, and that we can track where it goes. But that's an aberration. And when you're talking about something like Ethereum, it's telling Ethereum when you pay the fees, it's called gas. It's gas to operate your space in the network. That blockchain is auctioning block space, and if you want to get in on that very expensive block space to get a credible commitment out of this network of computers to do what they say they're going to do, you have to buy that block space, and you got to pay in gas. Well, the financial regulators are now trying to regulate whether you can trade in this gas or not. They're clearly in over their skis. Next, they're going to regulate what art you can send around. Next, they're going to have to regulate like how can that art be owned? Can people co-own art? Can you show it in a museum? What happens if you do this? What happens if like I take my piece of art and I give you the right to copy that piece of art and create a second version, but only a second version? Or if every time you sell that art, I get a piece, or if we co-own it together, or if we loan it out, or if we rotate it within our anonymous DAO with 7,000 participants from 28 different countries, right? It's insane to apply 100-year-old financial regulations to what is clearly a cross-cultural and a cross-technological movement and cross-national movement that is cutting across everything. Crypto, in my mind, and Web3 is really the internet coming into its own. The internet is taking charge of the world, which is not surprising. It's the greatest meme, the greatest story, the greatest network ever created. It is uniting more humans across more dimensions in more ways than ever possible. And so, of course, it's going to have its own native currency. Of course, it's going to have its own native governance. Of course, it's going to have its own native communities. Of course, it's going to have its own native art and native movements. And of course, it's going to have its own native ideologies and its own native fealties. So it's really the internet that is rising up, and Web3 is the version in which the users together are marching with the internet and sort of creating their own massive community that overlays. And it's actually not just a community, it's millions of sub-communities that are overlaying across nation states. So the whole classic model of this is United States law and that's Japanese law, this is financial regulations and that's oil and gas regulations, all of that is going to break down on the digital frontier. Yeah, in meat space it still applies, and we all live in meat space, but it no longer applies on the internet. And we are also spending more and more of our time on the internet, and that's the metaverse, and that's where great protocol politics come into their own.
And I think, Chris, in your capacity as an investor as well, I'm pretty sure you meet with regulators as well, or at least your company does meet with regulators, So to Naval's point, when this is that massive, that complex, I just don't think regulators can keep up with the rate of innovation here. So what's the real solve over here? We all want sensible regulation, but we can't regulate everything.
Well, a good story that people may not know is, in the 90s, there was this big battle over encryption. And in fact, Netscape, my partners, Mark and Ben, obviously worked on Netscape. Netscape was, if the 128-bit encryption version of Netscape was classified as munitions by the government and was illegal to download outside the United States. And at the time, the argument was, why would you need this kind of level of encryption unless you were, a criminal? Now, of course, the answer was, we envision a future in which someday people will be doing their banking and commerce and all sorts of other things on the internet. But it just didn't exist at the time in the mid 90s, right? I mean, maybe it did, but just in very small numbers. And so, you had this sort of fundamental asymmetry around new innovations, especially the more profound ones like this that take a while to kind of take hold. Where at the beginning, you can always find, some early adopting bad person who used encryption. I'm sure some bad people used encryption in the 90s, like it's just a reality, as they do today, right? And at the time, the good cases were relatively small. But of course, over time, the good cases grew very, very quickly, and now, presumably dwarf the bad cases. And by the way, I'll just add an addendum there. I think if you talk to most law enforcement, they would actually say the internet is their good friend, because of course law enforcement can go and, physically take computers and do things like that. And a lot of these kinds of end-to-end encryptions don't even matter in that case. Anyways, I tell that story because I think especially around kind of complicated internet technologies, you always have that asymmetry. And so the kind of the key thing, I think, is to find, you do need some kind of regulations to make sure that, to protect against criminals and money laundering and all these sorts of other things. Obviously, that's important. But you need to have, we believe you need to have some kind of balance where you allow entrepreneurs to go and invent stuff and build stuff. And so that's kind of the big discussion happening now. It's somewhat plays out at the regulatory level, as you say, but it really is also playing out at the political level. We're seeing this, you saw it in the infrastructure bill, right? Unfortunately, for whatever reason, I think this has been a little bit, this is crypto and Web3 has been politicized, and it's I think it's partly due to the fact that a lot of people, when they think of this, think of Bitcoin, and when they think of Bitcoin, they think of kind of libertarianism, and it then for whatever reason, like people on the left side of the political spectrum think of it as the enemy, when in fact this is a very neutral technology. And in fact, I think a lot of things like DAOs and community-owned and operating networks, I would argue, are collectivist and almost more kind of center-left or something, things like Ethereum. Anyways, I think that's another challenge out there right now, is to convince people that it's an important and malleable technology that can be used for all sorts of different purposes that are consistent with the goals of people, at both sides of in both political parties, and that the important thing is to, I think, bring more people in and help let them shape the technology in a way that in a positive way, as opposed to what we have now, which is a lot of I see it when I do a tweet thread. I get all these people quote tweeting me and talking about how incredibly dangerous blockchains are and things like this. A lot of scare tactics, a lot of ad hominem attacks, not great discussions. So that's what we need to improve. We need to evangelize. We need to explain. We need to build products that people use, and we need for people to kind of realize at a visceral level that this is not, it's not a scary or dangerous or political technology. It's an important technology for advancing the ideals of the internet and making it more, building, really awesome products and services, allowing creators to I think there should be a period where it's a golden period for creative people to share their works and make money. And that was sort of derailed by Web 2 and the business model of advertising and algorithmic feeds. So, we just have a lot of work to do, I think, in explaining these concepts.
Yeah, I think the path to great regulation starts with great discussion. So we got to continue to have those discussions and continue to evolve together. I want to go back to some of the stuff that Naval hinted earlier, and I said I'll come back to those. I think you touched upon a little bit about zero-knowledge proofs, Naval. Tell us a world where those are reality and what kind of use cases you imagine. Actually, first, let's start with zero-knowledge proof for the audience, and then we can go into how you think that world will look like when that becomes a reality.
Oh, geez, you're asking me to explain zero knowledge proofs to laymen in a casual
I mean, if
context.
there's one person who can
This is a
explain
massive,
complex
yeah.
topics, Naval, is you, my friend.
I
So
haven't thought this through as well, but essentially it is a way to reveal certain properties of things that you, of certain properties of data without revealing the data itself. You know, at a very simple level, it might be like, you know, is X in your collection? Or, oh God, Chris, do you have a great analogy for this? I haven't really thought through how to explain it to
I can
normies.
jump in as well
Yeah,
because we work at Coinbase on some of this stuff. So
yeah.
imagine an example of this could be: I want to know if Naval is 21 years old above or not. Is he male or
Correct.
female?
That's right.
Right? And
Without
I
giving you my age,
Yeah.
I can prove
exactly,
that I'm over 21. Yeah, exactly.
exactly.
You can reveal properties of data without revealing the data. But this can be used for all kinds of crazy things. It's not just that simple. You can also use it
Right.
to show that a blockchain is in a proper state and wasn't altered or tampered with without having to store or reveal the entire blockchain, which can create for very compressible blockchains. And ZK rollups, zero knowledge rollups, use this for high-speed transaction processing to scale blockchains. So it's not just about individual data. It's also there for scalability. It's also there for anonymity. And so they're mathematically incredibly complicated. And there's sort of been this belief, as long as I've been in this space, that zero knowledge true proofs are going to be the next big thing, but they're just too hard. And I think people have slowly just been working on the tool set and the infrastructure, and the great companies like Starkware and Zcash and Aleo, and you know, there's a whole bunch of others, Translucent. Like a lot of people are working in the zero knowledge space, and they're building the tools and existing blockchains and coins that take advantage of these things. And then other people, thanks to the magic of open source and composability, can reuse these tools. So I think we're going to see zero knowledge come much, much more mainstream. And so what you get in exchange is you get privacy and anonymity, you get scalability of blockchains, you get verifiability of blockchains, you get compactness of blockchains, you get scalability of transaction processing. And you also get like this, just, you can, for example, I could show up in this chat under a different pseudonym, not as Naval, and I could use zero knowledge proofs to prove that I have over 1 million followers on Twitter. I could even, if I want to selectively reveal to you that you follow me on Twitter without revealing to you which person I am. So I can do all kinds of magic to sort of control my data in such a way that I can build trust where I want to while still keeping my anonymity and privacy. So it's going to be another huge step change in the functionality that we see in Web3.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, I think of it as, like, to me, I think this is again, I'm not a cryptographer or anything, but this is my sort of my layperson's view of this, is that there's kind of two really profound ideas in cryptography in the last 50 years. And to me, the first one is the whole idea of public key cryptography, right? That invented in the 70s. Prior to the 1970s, I think if you asked anyone, mathematicians, philosophers, whoever, could you have a code? Could one person send a code to another person without those two people ever having gotten together in the first place and decide on the code? That just seemed like a impossible concept, right? And that's what the whole internet's built on this, right? On public encryption. And so it's very kind of counterintuitive. And the other interesting thing about public encryption, right, is it's kind of two different things. You can encrypt stuff, like hide it, but you can also authenticate stuff. And actually, the authentication use case is why is why we call it cryptocurrency. That confuses a lot of people too. They think it means hidden currency, when it's actually really the authentication use case. So you can sign things with your private key. To me, zero knowledge proofs are the second. I mean, there's probably many more. I'm not a cryptographer, but from my layperson's view, is the second really profound, counterintuitive cryptographic breakthrough. And you can do a few things with it, as Naval said. You can very selectively reveal certain information with mathematically provable that you reveal this one piece of information without leaking anything else, right? And that can lead to all sorts of interesting things, including what Naval was talking about, of kind of what I think of as future of kind of identity services, which is you have this sort of faceted identity. So meaning I can reveal that I'm worthy of this credit score, of getting this loan, without revealing all sorts of other stuff. And why is that important? One, it's important just for your own privacy and to sort of enforce these things that today are governed by long legal agreements that nobody understands. It also is a massive security improvement. Right now, we have this really ridiculous security model, Web 2, where you upload all this private information to all sorts of databases, and then like on an almost daily basis, they get hacked. And everyone listening here has been hacked 100 times through these Web 2 databases. It's a terrible method. And so the right method, of course, is store that information in have a much smaller attack surface, much smaller area of storage, and then reveal it as needed, in a very granular, faceted way. But as Naval also said, zero knowledge proofs has other really interesting property that play well with blockchains, which is they're much more computationally efficient to verify than to compute. And what that means is you can do with blockchains, you can let the blockchain just only do verification and not computation. And so there's a big wave of new technology coming that's going to be very exciting, which will dramatically scale blockchains that basically let you just run the computation on any server, Amazon server, whatever it might be, no kind of complex game theoretic mechanism, and then use the complex game theoretic mechanism of blockchain to verify that. And you get many orders of magnitude improvement in performance. And so I just give these examples of like very kind of counterintuitive things, at least to me, that are enabled with this like fundamental new cryptographic primitive. And I think the other, just last thing I'll say is, we work closely, for example, with Dan Bonet, who's a cryptographer at Stanford, and I think he would tell you that until recently there was a small handful of people working in this area. Because of Web3, that the investment has grown dramatically. And so as a result, I think we're in real time, like every month, every quarter, every year, we are seeing significant advancements in this space. So the things I just enumerated, that list might be much longer a few years from now. So I think it's a very, very exciting area of kind of fundamental research.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, Dan Bonet works really closely with us as well. Phenomenal thinker as well. And you're right, with this industry developing, we will see more talent attracted as a result, more innovation happening as well.
And zero knowledge is actually already being used all over. It's not like
Right.
it's already in deployment, right? Starkware has its roll-ups. Matter Labs is doing roll-ups on it. Sylvia Macaulay, who's one of the inventors of zero knowledge proofs, is behind the blockchain Algorand. Zuko and Zcash, that whole crew has been working on it forever. So the technology is already out there. It's just kind of, I think, I forget who said it, but it was like, the future's already here. It's just unevenly distributed. Well,
Right.
even in Web3 land, zero knowledge proofs are here. They're just unevenly distributed. And it's only a matter of time before we see them everywhere.
Well, with that note, let's head over to my favorite question of this chat, which is, what does the future look like? And I know, Naval, you said in the earlier session, it's going to be impossible to predict, but I'll still ask you, if you look into your crystal ball and look at the next 2 to 3 years, and we're having a similar conversation in 2 to 3 years, what has materialized? What has come true? What is that world that we're living in? Love to go through both of you as a closing question for this session, and maybe we'll start with Naval and then end it with Chris.
Yeah, I can't predict the future 3 years out, but I think it's actually easier to predict 10 years out, because 10 years out is you're just looking at the truth of the matter based on what you know today, what is inevitable because of what's true. Whereas 3 years out, you take into account all kinds of social and political and economic factors that are hard to figure out. So I would say, what these NFTs as programmable, ownable digital objects. I think Chris once said like web pages, like an NFT. Incredibly inseparable from the internet. You will not be able to run the modern internet without crypto tokens underneath. So I think countries crypto are going to have to embarrassingly tiptoe their way back in because they don't want to be left behind from being plugged into the advantages of the global internet. The Chinese model of the internet, I don't think it's actually that innovative. This may be controversial, but I think it's not that model. Right? We do X, they do Y. Sure,
No.
WeChat has some more information that we have locally, but even a lot of that, I would argue, is because of reasons or idiosyncrasy.
Naval, I think we are losing you a little bit. Maybe you're in a position where the internet isn't that great. So maybe we'll bring you back up again as soon as you find internet connectivity. Chris, maybe we'll go to you and ask for your couple of years out prediction.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it was Naval said, it's very, very hard to predict the timing on these things. I think the trends to watch, I think, first of all, as I said earlier, I really think about it as sort of this reinforcing feedback loop between infrastructure and application. So as an example, Ethereum L1 transaction today can cost between $10 and $100, which is, incredibly expensive for a typical transaction. So next year we'll have, I think, scaled popular L2s, Solana, other L1s like Solana, Avalanche, Flow, et cetera. What kind of new applications does having a $1 or 1 penny or a tenth of a penny transaction costs? What does that enable? I expect things like DeFi, NFTs, gaming, social networks. We'll see a whole new wave of applications when you have much more performant blockchains, which we'll have very soon. In terms of sort of verticals, I think we'll see more and more experimentation around different kinds of NFTs, programmable NFTs, NFTs that compose with each other, NFT-based gaming. I think social networks, communication services are very likely to emerge built on blockchains that have the property that you can, as a creator or a user or developer, know the rules of the system and know that the economics and the governance will stay consistent over time. What else? I think, I guess my other thing I'd say is, if you'd asked me this question with mobile, let's say in 2009, I'm not sure in honesty would have said that you'll be sending ephemeral photo messages and, vintage looking social networks, photo and social networks, and calling a car with your phone. Entrepreneurs are much better at coming up with great ideas than I am. So I think the other thing will just be I think to Naval's point earlier, that it'll be surprising. It'll just be a bunch of interesting, cool new stuff that I probably haven't thought of, but having this new kind of computing platform like blockchains enables. So.
Yeah, it's indeed a very exciting world. I think that what I'll say is we by the way, we lost Naval, and we pinged him and see if he can join back in. Yeah, but in any case, this was a fascinating conversation. Thank you very much, Chris, and Naval, wherever you are. I'll send you some spiritual messages saying that thank you very much for that. But hopefully our audience enjoyed this conversation as well. Right. Thank you very much for taking the time, Chris. And we will look forward to catching everybody else next week, folks. Thank you for joining today.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.